how do you make the decision? How do you advise people like your clients or your audience to make the decision between to what extent you should live with the debt and accept it and not obsess over it, and to what extent should you be pushing yourself harder to pay it off faster? Like, you don't want to live a life that is devoid of any joys, and you don't want to feel like paying off debt becomes your only focus in life. But on the other hand, you don't want to let it go to that other extreme where just through being passive and not proactive about it, you end up paying tens of thousands of dollars in unnecessary interest.
So I think one of the things is, before we even talk about emphasizing debt, I do emphasize with my clients the importance of an emergency fund, right? And especially now, the importance of an emergency fund. And so then when we move from that conversation, we get to the debt payoff conversation, I actually pull up debt repayment calculators and show them, if you just kind of continue making the minimum payments on your debt, this is how much in interest you're going to pay. That I think is really powerful, is when they see, oh my gosh, I'm going to lose out on like $20,000, let's say. 'Cause sometimes it is that high, when we're talking about student loans and credit cards. And then when I say, well, are there things in the budget that maybe we can trim down a little bit? Or maybe are there sources of income that we can take on, right? Because those are really, mathematically, those are the only two things that we can do: cut expenses or increase income. And so when I show them the possibilities, small things that we can do, small changes, I'm never going to tell a client, you're not allowed to dine out anymore. I'm never going to tell a client, look, if you you love your manicures, you must take that out of your budget, because then they're not going to stick to the budget, right? They're going to resent the budget. They're going to resent the plan. And so I tell them to make sure to keep what they truly value, and everything else may be cut. And I show them the power of what that maybe additional payment could look like.
Right.
And so I think that, personal finance is mainly behavior based, right? And I'm not a psychologist. Far from it, right? But what I do try to show them is when they start seeing also the math component of it, I think that is a powerful force that then they say, yeah, like I can make a sacrifice for a couple years. And that's what it is for most of my clients. I'd say, student loans are definitely the ones that usually take a little longer. So that's why I try to first focus usually on consumer debt. Like, what I mean by that, like mainly credit cards and even car loans that have higher interest. So usually try to focus on those, getting rid of those. And then as far as the student loans are concerned, I try to map out a realistic projection of what that could look like. So instead of going on like the 25-year or 15-year plan, what could maybe an 8-year plan look like for you, and something that's manageable. I think there's a lot of conversation in the community of you need to pay off your debt in like 4 years, like I did. And I don't think you need to go that aggressively, especially if in your budget it just doesn't allow for it. But as long as you have some type of a plan and you do see an end date and you have one in mind, I think that's also, it motivates people, to actually just want to get rid of the debt, while of course balancing things that they actually value.
What would you say to people, who are carrying a high debt burden, let's say 6 figures, could be a mixture of student debt, consumer debt, all that kind of stuff. And they feel like they're just treading water, and it is so hard for them to get ahead of. It's so hard for them to talk about. It feels like, a day-to-day burden, especially people who might be older, who might have kids, who might have a lot of responsibilities and aren't necessarily able to cut back all that much on their expenses. Where do they start?
Yeah, I think that, it's such a difficult question, but it's a very real question. It's a question that a lot of my clients come to me with. They're like, Cindy, like, I can't. I'm a single mom. Like, I can't really make, thousands of dollars of extra payments like you were able to your debt. What do I do? And so what I tell them is, first of all, breathe. Second of all, sit down maybe with someone, right? You can sit down with a friend, maybe a friend that's into all this finance journey as well, whatever, or it might be sitting down with a good book on personal finance or a blog or something to educate yourself to be able to have that conversation, and then write it all out. It might bring you a lot of anxiety. You might absolutely hate it. You might need a glass of wine. That's okay too, right? But write it all out. Write out what kinds of debt you have. Write out the overall balance on the debt, your minimum payment, your interest rate. Those are the 4 pieces of information I ask my clients to give me. Type, balance, minimum payment, interest rate. Write all of those out. Then get yourself organized, okay? Put a plan in place where you say, okay, I'm going to focus on this one debt. See, a lot of my clients, they come to me and they say, well, Cindy, I've been trying to make minimum payments on all of my credit card debt. And I have 5 different cards and I'm not getting anywhere. And so I tell them, well, instead, let's just focus on one card. Now, we make the minimum payments on everything else, of course, right? We don't want to go into default or anything. But let's focus on one debt and let's just take it one at a time. Because that's all you can do at that point, right? Just take it one at a time. Have a written plan out in place. And you might, after doing that, you might say, wow, like, it's going to take me like 10 years to get over this. But I do believe that there is a certain peace. There's a comfort in knowing, well, at least I have a type of plan now. I mean, look, a lot of people that take on mortgages, if they take on a 30-year mortgage, that's a 30-year journey, right? Now, I'm not saying that I necessarily want you to sit with non-mortgage debt for 30 years, right? I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that, with a mortgage, a plan is made for you, right? You have to pay off, this amount every month, et cetera, et cetera. With this journey of paying off student loans and credit card debt and kind of being overwhelmed, all you can do is just sit there, kind of write out a plan, try to educate yourself as much on personal finance. It's very easy to say, well, just go make more money, right? I also think that's really privileged to say, especially now with what's going on with the pandemic. For a lot of people, it's just not an option. But maybe look into creative ways that perhaps you can make more money, bring on an additional source of income. Like I was talking to a good girlfriend of mine and she was saying how, I think I might start cleaning apartments. Mm-hmm. Like it's something I know I'm good at and I know there's a demand for it. I'd be very careful with, PPE and all of that. And so maybe that's something I can start and take on, so maybe you yourself though can look at different ways, any other side hustles that you can take on. But my first thing is before you even go down that path of whether you can get a salary increase or a side hustle or create a business or whatever it is, before you even go there, I would say just sit down and write everything out. Know your numbers. I'm a big fan of just confronting your numbers head on because otherwise you can't make an effective plan.